Gene Accius, who I've recently been able to get to know with AARP. Gene, what I love in terms of this connection with what Rochelle was just talking about is you also have a global role and thought as the SVP of Global Thought Leadership at AARP, and you've been working on issues that are really meant to make an impact in life in so many different ways. I know that you focused on actionable solutions, policies, programs in the areas of living longer, healthier, more productive lives, in things that you're doing with AARP, trying to focus on connections in the world. Yes, as you age, but in the society in which we live when we're aging. And as you hear the ideas that we've been talking about here, can you give me your take on from a macro societal level and this idea of connections? What are the main things, either maybe react to things you've heard expressed so far, but what are the main ideas that you're coming across that you believe as a society are either the warning signs or the solutions that we need to be engaging in to try to strengthen these connections for us across the board? What's on your mind?
Maury, thank you so much. And I just want to echo how honored I am to be part of this amazing panel and could not agree more with all the comments that's been shared before. To answer your question more specifically, I think there's three things I would love to cover. The first one is this idea of interdependence, and I'll get into that in a second. The second is around courage. And then the third is around inaction is a choice. So if you were to take anything away as those 3 points, interdependence, courage, and inaction is a choice. If you think about it, and I think Cecilia alluded to this, that in January, we start the year 2022. That is only 2 weeks away. Doesn't that sound strange? 2022? I want you to sit with that for a second. It doesn't even feel like it's 2021. It's like we've been living an extended remix of 2020.
So true.
In A Tale of Two Cities, Charles Dickens famously wrote about the best of times and the worst of times. And there's no question that these last 20 months and counting have literally been the worst of times. We've seen millions of people around the world die of COVID. We know that this week alone in the United States, we reached another unfathomable number of over 800,000 people. We've seen hundreds of thousands of businesses closed, never to reopen. Within the weeks of the pandemic shutdown in March of 2020, millions of people lost their livelihoods. Many of them are friends, many of them are family members, and many of, in some cases, it might be some on the call today. And it's fair to say with emerging variants and our ongoing journey through the Greek alphabet, that anxiety and depression is at an all-time high. And as if millions of people dying and our way of life being turned upside down wasn't enough, as Thomas mentioned in his remarks, we've been going through a huge racial reckoning, particularly in the US, that continues to this day. So given that backdrop, I do think that it's important for us to kind of talk about the opportunity in front of us as we begin to, at some point in time, ease out of this pandemic. It's fair to say that this pandemic has, for better or for worse, in many cases both, has drastically changed our societies, our communities, and in many ways us. But I'd like to say that our collective future depends on the choices we make today. As the previous speaker said, that we are all weathering this storm, but we're really not in the same boat. And as a result, we cannot hope our way out of this. Fate will not create a new normal. It has to be intentional, and we have to be intentional in our choices. So what is the future that we seek? What have we learned during the pandemic to inform that future state? More importantly, to bring this home, when we look back at this point 10 years from now, what is the story you will be telling your children, your grandchildren, your neighbors, and your friends? I fundamentally believe that we have the capacity to change the world, that we don't have to accept the barrage of bad news and the doom and gloom predictions of our collective future. In order to create a better future, though, we cannot afford to stand on the sidelines or isolate ourselves from the current realities of the challenges we face, which is why I get back to what I said earlier, that it's important for us to really pause and think about the idea of interdependence, the idea of courage, and the fact that inaction is a decision we cannot afford to make. In many ways, inaction is a decision. When I talk about interdependence, what I mean by that is the fact that COVID demonstrated in very simple terms that we are interdependent, that what you do impacts me, that what I do impacts you, whether you're in DC or California or somewhere around the globe, that we are not going to get through this until we really think about this through an interdependence perspective. So for decades, many of us have had a false sense of independence. We believe that we have a right to independence. We've forgotten, however, that to be independent, we have to value interdependence or mutual dependence. True independence relies on us being mutually dependent on others. When you're interdependent, you understand that working together accomplishes more than can be accomplished on one's own, that those accomplishments set you up for all the things we do on our own to be happy, healthy, and more fulfilled. Being interdependent is the only way to achieve and sustain true and long-lasting independence. It's a win-win that too few people understand. So as a society and as a community and as individuals, we must move from independence, which is the attitude of I, to interdependence, which is the attitude of we. If we do not do that, then we will be going through the Greek alphabet until we reach Omega. The second point is that it takes courage to build something new. One of my favorite authors is Brian Stevenson, and he said that you cannot be an effective problem solver from a distance. There are details and nuances to problems that you will miss unless you're close enough to observe those details. So we must muster the courage and put ourselves close to the problems we seek to solve. It takes courage to get close to problems. And COVID has only exposed and exacerbated what have been longstanding and structural issues. We have to use this time to get close to the problems in order to solve them in a very meaningful way. And the only way we can do that is to engage the communities we engage, partner, or hope to serve. We must take the time to listen deeply and understand what communities want and need, and shift the way we think about those we serve, looking at first at what they have rather than what they lack, and then co-create solutions that meet their preferences, goals, and aspirations. Whether it's customers, whether it's your workforce, whether it's your neighbors, or whether it's your family. According to Stevenson, we are all broken by something. We have all hurt someone and have been hurt. We all share the condition of brokenness, even if our brokenness is not equivalent. Sometimes we're fractured by the choices we make. Sometimes we're shattered by the things we would have never chosen, but it is our brokenness that is our common source of humanity. So we have to embrace our humanity and our humanness. So we have an option. We can either deny our brokenness or we can embrace it. The last point is the fact that inaction is a decision we cannot afford to make. That inaction today means that things don't go back to the way they were, they just get worse. Inaction means that we don't understand or value interdependence, as I spoke about earlier. And to the point that Rochelle made earlier, when we think about the path forward, we have to address the issues of disparities and inequity across all the different demographics. These disparities and inequity were a common practice before the pandemic, and the pandemic has just put a magnified it and exacerbated in ways that we have to address. So we know that it's not your genetic code, but your zip code that determines how long you live in the US. And that there's on average, 20-year life expectancy gap. So 20 years less of life depending on where you live. Does that seem fair to you? Just think about what you've done over the last 20 years. And imagine if you didn't have those 20 years. So we have an opportunity to really think about the future that we want, to reimagine our societies in a way that values interdependence, that fosters courage to change, and that really goes about the path of doing that in a very meaningful and strategic and intentional way. So in addition to acting, in addition to being interdependent, I fundamentally believe that we have a real chance to rewrite the script of a post-COVID America, a script where the sequel can be much better than the first. But in order for us to do that, we have to, in everything we do and with everything we have to construct a future that builds wealth, strengthens health, and ensures the same economic and educational opportunity that benefits not just the privileged, but those who have been historically marginalized and everyone in between. This isn't wishful thinking. We just have to be brave enough to do it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gene. Hey, we're getting fed some good stuff here today, folks.